Hello everyone and welcome back to the Business or Show Business with me, Jamie Buddy. In this episode, I'm absolutely delighted to be joined by the founders of the Hope Mill Theatre, that's Joseph Houston and William Whelton. In 2015, they took a former mill and they turned it into one of the most talked about venues in the UK. Alongside still managing that venue, they are also co-directing and producing High School Musical. It opens at the Lowry this summer and then transfers to the Troubadour in Wembley Park later in the year. It stars Donovan, Judd, and a whole cast of talented performers. In this episode, we talk about auditioning, producing a show, swapping your performer hat to a business hat, and all things the business of show business. So I guess, first of all, it's been just over 10 years now since the Hope Mill opened. Now looking back, has it hit the vision you initially planned, or is it something different altogether?
Gosh, I think it's such a long time to sort of reflect back on. But I think if we were sort of sat here, just over 10 years ago, I think it's far surpassed anything we could have ever dreamt it could be, to be honest. We had our ambitions and we had our sort of aspirations for what we were going to sort of achieve. I guess we could have said back then, within 5 years, and we were lucky enough to sort of have ticked a lot of that business plan off within the first couple of years. And then, with everything, your ambition grows, your dream then gets to the next thing. And so I think looking back, there's no way we could have ever thought we'd sort of still be going over 10 years in, let alone having sort of ticked a few of the milestones that we have off.
And then talking of business plans, what was that like, going from being kind of on stage creatives to then being this production house, these creatives, these founders, and putting pen to paper to make a business plan? What was that initial shift like? And was there any resistance mentally or just to maybe making that transition?
It's funny, isn't it? Because, we'd never run a business before. Prior to opening Hope Mill, and sort of one of the reasons why we had the inspiration to open a theatre was because Will had started to produce. So Will had produced under his own name a couple of professional pantomimes back home in a theatre in Cheshire that I directed and Will choreographed. So suddenly you were sort of working on the dipping your toe on the producing side of things, and then I suddenly was dipping my toe on the creative side of things, and we really enjoyed it, and we loved that, and it was a great sort of testing for what was to come. But when we took on Hope Mill, it was, the space was advertised on Gumtree, a storage space, and we just had this dream. We were very naive. We say that a lot of our success in the early days was, sort of 50% naivety, 50% ambition. Actually, I don't even know if it was 50% ambition back then. It probably was more naivety, but we just had this idea and we really felt ready for it. But looking back now, and often we sort of stop and reflect, our landlords who own the building, sort of if we reach a milestone, and certainly recently with the 10th anniversary, they sort of go, oh, those two young boys that came in and pitched that idea to us, we didn't have a clue what we were doing. And we put this business plan together, and, we've never put a business plan together. But it was a great starting point for us, because that's sort of been the story of Hope Mill and its success. Is Will and I have just gone in and given our everything to whatever it was at that point in our journey. And obviously back then it was securing a space to be able to make this vision a reality. But we took out a £10,000 startup loan through a business and a government startup business scheme. And that £10,000 was all we had. And again, a lot of reflecting because we reached the milestone of 10 years. Yeah. But I remember Will bought a notebook and we literally wrote, itemized everything that we would need to buy to open up a restaurant and bar. And then we would put the price of what it would cost. So we're talking like, teaspoons, 12 teaspoons. And then suddenly we sort of got, I remember we wrote everything out, and then we got to the end and we added it up, and we were just praying that it was going to be under £10,000. So yeah, we've come a long way, but it's, reflecting back, I think it's been a journey to where we are now.
Every day's a school day.
But we still continue to learn, yeah.
And I think there's also like full sense of confidence. You know, when you're a performer and you've been in the industry a while, you know people, people know you. So there's always sometimes an additional pressure. But when you transition to something else, people only see what you show them. So it's like, I say I am this, so I am this. So there's almost like a full sense of security, but in a positive way, that I always try and explain to people that if they are leaving the sector or being performance adjacent, there's actually a superpower in that, as opposed to like, you're not starting again. And now, obviously, fast forward 10 years, you've got such a reputation as being a prominent producing house based out of Manchester. Regionality, that's such an important thing. Why is that so important to you both?
Gosh, I mean, you know, it's interesting what you just said then as well. It's like, I think early on, we were very much seen as performers that opened a venue, like opened a theatre. Whereas now I think we have to remind people that's how we started and that's got into it. And we just found the love of creating opportunities rather than looking for opportunities for ourselves. But to answer your question, I mean, I grew up, you know, a small town just outside of Manchester. So Manchester for me was my, you know, home city growing up. So I think a few of my early theatrical experiences as a young person were going to Manchester to see a show. And then Joe, you know, you originally come from Glasgow, so it can't get any more regional than that. So I think we both had this like passion for where we were from. And, you know, we'd done the sort of the London scene for a while. And actually we planned to sort of maybe relocate to Manchester, get on the property ladder and sort of see how the city felt for us. Not necessarily to go, let's open a theatre. However, we fell in love with this incredible cultural ecology here in the north. And I think that the biggest thing is opportunity. I think that's what we saw. We saw so many, you know, playwrights and small theatre companies that were just like making their own work because, you know, there wasn't that many opportunities out there. So they were creating some. And I think we just suddenly thought, this happens so much in London. A lot of the off-West End scene in London has been established for a very, very long time. And of course, that was our inspiration. But we were like, there's not many small theatres just popping up around the country and certainly regionally. So I think we just thought, let's do it here. And again, if we knew then what we know now type thing, we probably would have run a mile, but we didn't. And we had that sort of like feeling of Manchester needs this. It needs a space that would bridge the gap to the sort of the larger commercial venues, or certainly the large subsidized venues, for companies to use and go through as their ambition grows, like ours. And that's kind of, I think, why regional is so important. And I think over the years, you know, the last decade, again, as sector-wide has shown the importance of regional and how shows can start regionally and transfer to London or tour. And, you know, there's a huge audience up here that, you know, certainly Manchester audiences, they're so lucky. They actually receive so many sort of London shows before London now. And I think that's the thing. There is a real audience here that deserve variety in how they sort of access culture. And I think that was kind of not necessarily the reason, but it was, you know, we looked out, but we fell in love with the city first and foremost, I think.
Well, and consumer habits are always changing, aren't they? And I think it's no longer necessarily the top of someone's list to, I must see a West End show when I'm in London. They want the experience, so whether that's, they don't want to travel down to London. And obviously Manchester's such a culturally rich city that you can kind of pairs up, I'm sure, with so much. So let's talk about your next biggest project and how not only are you producing, but you're co-directing, obviously, in High School Musical. A huge project, a beloved title with a built-in audience and probably some expectations attached as well. First of all, what drew you to, I guess, getting your head in the game and doing High School Musical?
I love it. Yes, we've been making a lot of those in certain calls about the show. There's been a lot of, we're all in this together, guys. Let's it never wears thin. What drew us to the show? Well, I mean, firstly, Disney. I mean, the dream. We could only have ever dreamed of not only Hope Mill Theatre and managing to secure a Disney title, but then creatively us being able to work on a Disney title. So that was always on the bucket list. And then I guess High School Musical, it was always there. We've always got shows as producers. Well, there's always just shows that are there and that you think, oh, you know, wouldn't that be great if you brought that back? Or, you know, and that was one of them. And then randomly we were at a friend's house And their daughter, who was about 9 years old, this was 2 years ago, was about 9 years old, and she was singing one of the High School Musical songs as we were sort of chatting. And I was sort of taken aback and thinking, that was my sister's generation, and she's, nearly in her 30s. And I thought, how does she know the show? And they opened up and explained that the new Disney Plus franchise that had gone on, recently that a younger generation had found, and then suddenly they were finding the original movies through that, and there was a whole new love for them. And I guess it was sort of there, and you've always got your producer head on and sort of creative head on, it's always there, and you always take inspiration from things. And I remember us driving away and leaving and thinking, wait a second, that this could be something more than we thought it was. We thought, oh, it'd just be people that remember it. But suddenly there's a whole new generation that have discovered it. And that was the catalyst for us to start putting a pitch together and seeing if we could then secure the rights to the show.
And I think it's obviously got such a legacy audience who are now potentially parents or older siblings. But there's been such obviously a big injection in vertical advertising and vertical dramas, things like that. And I know Disney on TikTok, they cut up the entire movie and drip fed it on TikTok over 52 different clips. So I think younger people are now finding the show, which is great. And then obviously producing and co-directing, how obviously you open next month before it going on a wider tour. How do you balance those two hats? Because producing and directing obviously go hand in hand, but they're also very different. So how does that smorgasbord of skill sets interlace?
Yes. I mean, absolutely two very different hats. I think essentially over the years, we've produced predominantly through Hope Mill. So we've worked with lots of different directors and produced mainly. And then I think ultimately, and then we started to find titles that we were so connected to creatively that when we were thinking of, what directors we work with or what directors are out there, we were actually like, we feel like we could bring something to the table for this. And I think that's partly having a venue, a small venue, is you wear many hats, and we've always done that. Thankfully in sort of recent years, our sort of strings to our bow are less like cleaning the toilets and working on the bar, thankfully. So we can sort of focus on producing and more sort of creative endeavors, which is of course why we opened it in the first place, albeit we will jump on the bar and clean a toilet if we have to. That's just running a venue. But I think, as we've sort of gone along, we're so used to wearing multiple hats. And I think as you build a production creatively, it actually only benefits the show and everyone involved if you understand everything that kind of goes into it. There's always a budget. This is absolutely the biggest project we've ever worked on. And, and we've got the privilege of working with Chris Harper Productions as our amazing co-producers, and the team there are amazing. So we have a lot of support in the commercial sector in order to make this project at this scale work. But I also think, for example, we're always going to push and strive for the best production we can, but there's always a budget, there's always a limit. And I think that's the interesting thing that we've always found, is that because we wear those multiple hats, there's always a creative way. And sometimes it's the better way is having to sort of rethink something. If you can't have your, I don't know, I always describe it as this, but if you can't have your incredible sort of platform lift because it's just beyond the budget, well, then you rethink that moment. And often you look back and go, actually, it would have been too much. And there is something, we often say it was too expensive or it had too much going on. That can sometimes be a negative. And I just think wearing those two hats, it's got to work. Ultimately, we've gone out to investors for this commercial project. We are answerable to them. We need to make it work for everyone. There's so many things you have to think about. And then you have to think about making the best show you possibly can. Yeah. And the legacy of this piece, I think that's something that we've always got in the back of our mind. But I think we will do a better job knowing how the overall production and everyone involved in it, because it takes a village to put on a show, are pieces and cogs of making this machine eventually what the audience will get to enjoy.
But also being able to be part of not just making the show in the room or in the space, but also as producers having the responsibility of how is the show being marketed?
Yeah.
What does it look like? What does the poster look like? What do the assets look like? What are the taglines? And how that then, as producers, we can take that creativity into the room because, you know, we know what the show is that we want to make. So then we're best placed to then feed into how that show's marketed and how it's experienced by an audience, and working with the venues, you know, speaking to the team at the Lowry and at the Troubadour Wembley Park and going, okay, this is the show we're making. How can we all, I was going to say, how can we all be in this together? But I mean, you know, it's true, because, you know, we're all, I feel like in theatre, we're all responsible for a show's success from the bottom up. I think everyone plays a part in that whole experience. And again, I think that's partly comes from us running a venue, is we never just think about what the audience view on stage. We think about the minute they walk through the door, what experience are we giving them so that they leave and go, not only was that one of the best shows, 5 stars I've ever seen, but my goodness, money well spent. I had the best night of theatre. And I think that that's where for us, I think, it sort of makes us unique in our thinking, because we wear the producer and the director hat, that's when I think it can really work.
I think it's so refreshing to hear the understanding of like the financial restraints or great things that come with that, because I think sometimes we're always told, aren't we, to glamorize starving for the art form, and we can't talk about money and this and that. But I think at the end of the day, if you can't make a product that's sustainable or financially viable, it's not going to last. And obviously we sadly hear about shows closing, so it's nice that that runs alongside the creativity. Speaking of creativity and the cast, quite a collection there. Some are legends, some icons, some newer graduating talent. How did the casting process go for this production of High School Musical?
Gosh, I mean, it started way back in December. But as an overall, and maybe you want to talk in a bit more detail, but I think as an overall process, it has just been joyous. And, you know, I think we'll always probably remember, you know, I think we started in December, but then we started to do our sort of larger calls in February. And it was probably the best few weeks I think we've ever spent in an audition process, in the sense that the energy and, you know, the talent that we saw, and I think we had thousands of submissions, and then you have to whittle that down. And we work with Pearson's casting directors that are fantastic, and we've worked with them before. They whittled that down, and then you see hundreds, but the talent was just out of this, you know, it makes our job harder in terms of sort of whittling it down, but the talent was extraordinary. But also just the sort of generosity of those artists coming into the room and showcasing what they had to offer to fit our jigsaw puzzle of the show. But gosh, the energy and the passion for this show was overwhelming. I think it just kept cementing the weight of the legacy of this piece, and so many people coming in being like, the reason I am an actor and I am in this, you know, this sector, this wild sector that we all, you know, do, is because of this movie. And I think we kept going, yeah, it was so ahead of its time 20 years ago. The representation within the movie, the fact that you could really be like, I'm a theatre kid and I want to be a theatre kid. And it's like, yeah, it was amazing, I have to say.
I think as well, you know, we went into this process under no illusion of what the show demands. I think it's really easy to look at this show and maybe think of the movie version and go, oh, you know, lovely songs, like fun dances. The stage version is it works you really hard. It asks a lot of performers. It is a massive sing for pretty much everyone. It is a big old pop sing. Our version, it'll be a big old dance. You know, we're really, again, that's why in the room, you know, when we were auditioning, Aaron Renfrey, our choreographer, because of course it's a original production, and we totally re-choreographed the show, and we're really pushing people to the limit of what we can, you know, we can do, which is thrilling and exciting with regards to the choreography. But you know, we needed performers that, and again, it would have been so easy to go, oh, you know, it's High School Musical, everyone's going to be, you know, new grads, but actually there's an element of discipline and experience that the show commands. And I think we went in there knowing that already, and knowing that we needed to work with performers who understood and were at that place in their journey where they had some jobs behind them and they understood the craft and they knew their voices and their bodies. But then at the same time, it was so important to us that we got some great emerging talent coming through as well, which we do. And, and a lot of them actually that are making their professional debut are also first cover those lead roles, which I think is so thrilling as well, because who knows whether they will have an opportunity to go on, but the point is that they'll have that experience of also, being able to cover one of the lead roles. So yeah, to echo what Will said, it was just an incredible experience.
Yeah, and obviously with Jason Donovan, Harry Judd, you got Tobias, Luke, Casey, some amazing people, and then that newer talent. And I think what's nice to hear there is you still have to cut your teeth in this industry. I think because of the way the world is now and the immediacy of how you can book a holiday, buy a house, click of a button, but actually you do have to graft. You have to build your skill set, build your trade, and it's really refreshing to hear that. Can we have a little sneak peek behind the casting process? And what I mean by that is maybe audition advice or tips, especially coming from your regional house as well. People might have easier access to you directly, where maybe some bigger shows, there's lots of hoops to jump through, lots of people, lots of emails. I'm not telling people to hound you, but you obviously maybe see talent in a closer capacity, which is lovely. Do you have any advice or even some red flags from people casting, not necessarily from this project, but previous projects? What do or do you not like to receive as producers, as directors, as venue owners?
We do get unsolicited emails from actors that will be like, I know that you're casting this show, I'd love to be seen. And full honesty, I will always forward it on to the casting director. Always. I might not always reply, but I certainly, because this is why we get casting directors on board, because that's we trust them. So I will always forward it on to casting director. But equally, when we've crossed paths with people before, if we've gone to see showcases, we've worked with students before at different drama schools, like, Lanes, a few of the Lane students have been in some concert versions that we've done before, like Gypsy and Nine. And I always say that now that we've worked together in some capacity or our paths have crossed and we've connected, please feel that you can reach out to us, because that this is a massive industry. So there's tens of thousands of emails you could get for a job, and that's why we have to go through the sort of official channels. Yeah. But I feel like you say, we are a little bit more accessible than maybe a lot of the other bigger creators and producers, because we are grassroots, as well. So yes, if we cross paths, if we've met, if we know you in some capacity, please reach out to us. I always, tell a story that a great actress that we know, Mary Barclay, I knew her from back in Scotland, and she reached out to us. This is way back in 2017 when we were doing a production of Pippin, and she said, I'm so sorry to message you on Facebook, but and I thought, of course we'll get you in. And then we ended up getting Mary in, and she ended up being cast in 2 roles, and and she ended up winning an Offie award. So again, it's just that thing of like, of course we want to give amazing opportunities to people. But yeah, I mean, as for sort of advice with regards to auditioning, it's a hard one, isn't it? Because it's sort of, what do you say? Like, just go in there and be the best version of yourself that you can be in all areas, and enjoy it. Let your personality shine through. That is so important to us as well. And that snapshot of that moment that we get to see you. It's not about whether you go wrong in the dance. It's not about whether you crack on the note. Like, everybody's human.
I think that's probably like the thing I wish I sort of knew.
Yeah.
When I was an actor auditioning, is that actually everyone on that panel is rooting for you to succeed. And I think we assume that they're like, oh, they want us out of the room. We don't, as creatives, and maybe that's just us, but I don't think as a sector we do. I've never been in a process on this side of the table where that's been the case. We are rooting for each artist that comes in that door, and ultimately we want them to be themselves. And I think that's, again, a misconception of like, no, be yourself. You know yourself, so you know which bit of we might want to see in a professional work environment, but be yourself. Like, we want to see people that we can work with in a usually quite a fast process of delivering a show. And it all comes down to like a recipe of sort of ingredients that, you know, casting a show is putting together a certain array of skills in order to deliver said piece of art that we're creating. And I think, again, that's something that, you know, your skill set, you know, where your experiences are. Make sure when you're coming in and delivering the I guess the audition, the materials, or whether it's your own song or whether it's dance, just think to yourself about going, I need to showcase these skills. That's what this is about. It's kind of a job interview. And don't think about anything else, and just think, I need to show them I can sing. So I'm going to sing this because I know this really shows me off. It's a safe choice. It's going to show them the range that they've asked to see, but I'm not going to go in with something new I've never tried and tested because there's an element of risk. It's those kind of things. It's going, how do I show them that I can, you know, act? So for example, if I'm going and doing some scene work and it's a recall, if you're like, I do struggle to learn material, learn it to the best of your ability, but have it in your hand. And I can assure you, you'd walk in and go, do you mind if I just keep this in my hand as a comfort? Everyone on the panel would go, of course. And if you know that would mean that you do a better job with those sides, that's what you should do. And again, it's just delivering in a confident, professional manner, showing your personality, those ingredients that we need to see. We don't want to see you stumble. We don't want you to go, I know it, and then you get 2 lines in and you don't know it. And it's that, because then you start to feel the nerves creeping in. We are rooting for you to do well. And I think that's something to just always factor into those rooms. And we want you to be in that room. You've already, probably not what you're taking into account, but by being in that room, we probably whittled down thousands to hundreds. You deserve that moment and that opportunity, so take it. And I think that's what people need to remember.
That's really lovely. It's about giving yourself maybe even parameters to curate hopefully your radius of success, or your area of success. Don't think I need to do this, and this thing. Actually, what can I deliver on the day? Now, as business owners, what skills do you now possess or are more aware of do you wish you had as performers? Or would you say performers do this, whether that's the fiscal responsibility of like put some money away, or the idea of, you spoke a lot about collaborating, so it could be networking. What are some of the business skills you think performers should do?
Pause. That is such a great question.
It is a great question.
I don't know if I've ever really considered it.
Instinct-wise, I would say always take opportunities wherever you can.
Yeah.
And that's something I guess I learned as a performer, if you can afford to. I mean, I've sort of put over that as well. Like, you know, my circumstances as an actor changed at different points. Some things I could afford to do. But what I mean by that is just like, you know, if you have an in with a particular creative, ask them if you can be a runner for auditions for the day. I mean, we pay a lot of our runners that come to help us with auditions, but you're actually sort of being around that process, and you're sort of dipping your toe into sort of seeing what a casting director would do and sort of things like that. So I would say, like, take opportunities sort of where you can, certainly within your interests, and what will either benefit you as a performer or will open your eyes to other sort of opportunities. And I think what I've realized now is, like, I probably had a skill set that I certainly didn't nurture when I was younger in terms of business, because I didn't know how or why or whatever. And I've learned as I've gone. But I think now I'm sort of over 10 years into Hope Mill, I don't see my performing career as a failure. I never got to do what I wanted to do as a performer. I see it as part of my journey of going, I actually wanted, at the time of being a young person, wanted to be a performer, because that's kind of the only career that I thought you could do in theatre. So my eyes hadn't been open to this sort of the options, but I realised that this was a sector that I wanted to be in. So I went to train as a performer, did the performing thing, good and bad experiences, and then we opened Hope Mill. And I think what I've realised is I'm still living the dream I started out as a young person by going, I wanted to be in this sector, and I wanted to be in the theatrical world of making theatre and being part of it. And actually, I found more joy making theatre, making opportunities, and, you know, making small differences to, you know, audiences that come through the door, whether it's through joy or whether they're made to think about something. I get a lot more reward from that than I do the applause at the end of a performance. And I think I've realized that, you know, there are no failures. And I think you don't know your journey and your path. And I think what I would tell myself back then is almost allow it to be carved out for you, but don't say no to anything, and be open to other opportunities, options, because you might find that's what you were meant to do.
But also, and exactly to echo that, we're creatives. I like to call ourselves artists and creatives, you know, not necessarily performers. Like, because I think that then suddenly, as Will said, the minute you think I'm a performer, the reality is that unless you have an extremely successful career, which happens to the very few that go from job to job, that are able to sustain a career, financially sustain themselves through this industry, the reality is that when you're not a performer, what are you? Because then if you're not a performer, you're then not feeding that creativity inside of you. You know, when I wasn't performing and acting, I was a waiter and I was miserable. And I thought that was it. I just thought you had to be a waiter until you were a performer. And then suddenly, you know, we're not sitting here saying to everyone go and open a theatre, because we probably would be the last people to tell you that. We'd probably tell you not to. However, feed that creativity inside of you, you know, and that can be, there's such a wide industry out there and there's so many avenues. Dip your toe in a few things and see where you end up, because it might just mean that when you're not doing that thing that you've set out to do, be it performing, you can still feed that soul inside of you, because it can be a really lonely industry as well if you're sort of just waiting on the opportunity to come.
Great. And just before I let you go quickly, who would you both play in High School Musical, and why should people come and see the show?
We've been asked this so much, and I feel like your answer is?
My answer is, who I would like to play is Sharpay Evans, because she's iconic. Yeah. It's unlikely I'll be able to play her, so I'd probably say Ryan and just go for the twin. Yeah, probably. I would, but I definitely I remember being a lot younger and sort of just being obsessed with Sharpay. She's essentially a gay icon.
Yeah.
Of course she is. And actually, when I answer it, my instinct goes to Miss Darbus, but I realised that our first answer for both of us has been female characters. But I guess that's probably the sort of, you know, the gay boys in us that just love these incredible,
powerful women,
well-crafted women. But yeah, I feel like that Miss Darbus, in the sense that, like, I just love everything she stands for. She's fighting for arts within the school, and you know, and really values it because it means so much to her. It's not a joke to her, and I think that's sort of, you know, it's a big message within the piece. So I'm giving it up for Miss Darbus.
And then quickly, why should people come and see this production?
I mean, for so many reasons, but I would say this is High School Musical like you've never seen it before. I mean, the way we are going to tell this story in 2026, yes, it's going to be a period piece because the early 2000s is now a period of time. But it will have all the bells and whistles of a production that you would expect to be built for West End standard in 2026. The talent we have on stage and off stage is like top tier, next level, some of the most incredible creatives we've ever had the opportunity to work with. And I think in terms of the staging, we are bringing our audience into the world of High School Musical. I think in 2026, the world can be a bit of a strange place. So we're inviting the world into a much safer space of High School Musical to sort of live and breathe with these characters, telling what is actually a story with a really beautiful message about finding things that you love to do and doing it regardless, and, you know, not sticking to the status quo, and be who you want to be kind, and spread a little love.
I couldn't would have been it myself. I'm coming to see it. Sounds great.
Perfect. Well, cheers, guys. Thank you so much for your time. And I look forward to heading to one of the two venues to see the production.